This week's parsha is Parshas Vayechi. Pretty under the weather this week, just like the rest of the tri-state area, but wanted to pull through anyway. Baruch Hashem, we haven't missed a week yet. And Baruch Hashem, it's a beautiful parsha, many things going on. At the end of the parsha is really this is the end of Sefer Breishis. This is the end of the story of Yaakov and his sons, really the end of this stage of the story, and really waiting to begin the next stage, the prelude to the next stage of the story, the beginnings of the Jewish people when they're in Mitzrayim and they leave Mitzrayim and they go and receive the Torah. The parsha ends with Yosef's goodbye message to his brothers, and he tells them that he's going to die, and Pakod Yifkod Eschem, Hashem is going to redeem you. Those are code words that the Redeemer Moshe uses as a later point, Pakod Yifkod, and they were given that simon by Yosef. And Yosef says Hashem is going to bring you out of here, and you should bring my bones out and bury me in Eretz Yisrael. And Yosef dies, and they bury him, and they place him in an Oron in Mitzrayim. That's the end of the Sefer Breishis. And it's interesting that that's sort of the end line, that they bury Yosef in Mitzrayim and they wait. Now we're waiting the years of Golus till we take Yosef out. That's the ending of Sefer Breishis. I think it really brings to the forefront the greatness of Yosef and how, in a certain sense, his greatness seems to be much more than the other brothers, and that the end of Sefer Breishis is about the end of Yosef's life. That it all seems to revolve around Yosef, and he's the one who gives them chizuk, and he's the one who tells them Hashem is going to take them out of Mitzrayim. Anyway, so there's an interesting thing about the passing of Yosef, that Yosef, as we know, is the second youngest brother, and yet he was the first of the brothers to pass away. And the Gemara and the Midrashim discuss why Yosef passed away before his brothers. So I wanted to explore with you just three different Pshatim that the Chazal bring of why Yosef was the first brother to pass away. The most famous Pshat is the Gemara in Sota, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. The Gemara says because he heard the words Avdecha Avinu, and he didn't say anything. The Medrash spells out that when the brothers, before they knew this was Yosef, and they were making impassioned pleas on behalf of their family, there was a total of 5 times where they said, "Our father, your servant," in that way of flattering him. And Yosef didn't protest to that. So the Medrash says that it was shtika kehoda adami, it's sort of an admittance, and therefore he lost 10 years of his life for the 10 times. Even though the pasuk says 5 times, the Radal explains, but it was said, Yosef was pretending he didn't speak Hebrew. He was having Menashe as an interpreter. So it was said to him by the brothers, and then Menashe repeated it to him. So he heard it 10 times. And for those 10 times, he lost 10 years of his life. Similar to what we find by Yaakov Avinu, that he lost years of his life for an answer that he gave word for word. Similar concept, that he lost years of his life for his words. And it's interesting, it's important to point out, Yosef is renowned for his kibbud of aim. He's known to be a person of great kibbud of aim. Chazal point out that when Yaakov came down to Mitzrayim, it says, "Vayoser Yosef merkavto," Yosef girded his chariot to go greet his father in Goshen, that he had plenty of servants to help him gird his chariot. He was a leader. He did it himself out of respect for his father. And that as much as Yosef was careful his whole life with kibbud of, at this moment, there was some flaw here, and therefore that he should have stopped them from saying it somehow without blowing his cover, and therefore he lost years of his life. Okay, that's why Yosef lost 10 years, of why Yosef passed away 10 years early, and the first of his brothers. Gemara in Sota says another pshat, because he was knowing atzmo birabanos, because he had a leadership position. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Nun Hey explains that leadership, rabbanos, is one of the things that shortens the life of a person, and one of the proofs is Yosef, that you see that he died early. So it seemed that according to this pshat, I know that there are milas to taking positions of leadership. There are also chesronos, and Yosef had tremendous opportunities here. The fact that he was the leader enabled him to do all these things to save his brothers and to set certain state, to save the whole world in a certain sense at this time, and enabled him to be the leader who led Yaakov's burial, which Chazal tell us he was rewarded that Moshe Rabbeinu took care of his burial because of the fact that he took care of Yaakov's burial, meaning all the Shvatim were brought out of Eretz Yisrael, but his was unique because of his special, what he was able to do for Yaakov Avinu. So with all the benefits that came with Yosef being a ruler of Mitzrayim, it came with a downside too. I'm not sure what the pshat is in why Rabbanus length shortens a person's life. I don't know if it's the responsibility, the pressure, the stress. Did not get a chance to explore it, but that's another idea Chazal say of why Yosef passed away early. So I found the third pshat, which I've never heard before, which surprised me very much. So it says in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, beginning of Shvi, Yosef, the brother, after Yaakov passes away, the brothers come and they beg Yosef for mercy. They're afraid that now Yosef might take vengeance on them, now that Yaakov is no longer alive. Yaakov reassures them, if 10 candles couldn't put out one can't put out 10. He says, don't worry, I'm going to be supporting. I'm going to be supporting you and your family. I mean, you guys, you're at the end of the day, you have the head of Mitzrayim feeding you now, so you're in good shape. So Chazal say in the Medrash Sechel Tov, he shouldn't have said, I'll support you. Hashem is the one who supports everybody, not people, and therefore he died before his brothers. That's what the Sechel Tov says. Fascinating idea that on Yosef's Madrega he was criticized for saying such a language of I'm going to support you. That I guess it bespoke of a certain gaiva to say such a thing. The parallel I could think of is there's an idea by the Malachim who were sent to destroy Sodom. So it says in Yud Tes Yud Gimel, it says that they said, Ki mashchitza menachnu es makom hazeh. We're going to destroy this place, is what they told Lot. Hashem has sent us to destroy it. And Chazal say, the Medrash Rabbah brings that because they were nisko, and they said ki mashchitza menachnu, because they made it sound like they're in charge here, and they are able to destroy Sodom themselves, therefore they were punished. It says that these two malachim were kicked out of the mechitza of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for 138 years. So, even though they said in the same pasuk, but because they used this language that bespeaks a certain gaiva, therefore they were punished very harshly. I don't think the pshat is that Yosef or the malachim, I don't think the pshat is they felt gaiva. I think the pshat is the language that they used wasn't careful enough. We have to be careful about the words that we use when we speak and the implications that come from them. So in a sense, this third pshat, in a sense, ties back to that first pshat, that they both have this idea of the importance of speech, that being very careful in how we speak is sometimes a tremendously big deal. And just close with an idea that Rav Shmuel Homener brings, and it's not really connected to this, but it's just caught me very much by surprise. There's an isser of a navi sheker. There's an isser of a person saying that Hashem told him to do something when Hashem didn't tell him to do anything. So the Hagos Maimoni brings that, this is in Perek K, Ha'achaches of Hilchos Akum, that a person has to be careful not to say, even as a joke, Hashem told me to do this. Because he's showing people, I guess it's in that isser of like making it like Hashem told you to do something. When he says, Hashem told me this. So he says, just pointing out that people are not careful about this. They don't realize that saying such a thing could be a big deal, but that it actually is a big deal. And he brings somebody, Rav Zalman, that I'm not sure exactly who it is, somebody holy, that he was with a chacham who was supposed to, he asked him, are you going to Vilna? He says, Hashem amar ilai al ta'avor. Hashem told me not to go, or something like that. And the Zalman got very upset. He says, you can't say such a thing even as a joke, that it's you're playing with something which is a potential punishment of chenek. You have to be very, very careful. And just this idea that we have to be knowledgeable of halacha, we have to be cognizant of what comes out of our mouth, and the more we can excel in that, the holier people we become, the greater people we become, and the more successful we'll be at it. And that it's something we have to keep at the forefront of our awareness. And thank you all for listening through this Sefer Breishis. Mir Hashem Weiter, wishing you all a wonderful Shabbos.